Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Roadmap to a Sustainable Supply Chain, and it's brought to you by Setlog. I'm Heather Thorpe, and I'm from Just Style, and I'll be moderating today's presentation for you. We've allocated time at the end of this presentation for a Q&A session with Guido. So if you have anything that you would like us to put to him, then please go to the questions box, which is in the GoToWebinar toolbar, and include any of the details of your questions, and I can put these to him at the end. Finally, we'll be providing an audio-visual recording of this webinar, including the Q&A session and accompanying presentation following today's event. You'll find this at www.just-style.com/thoughtleaders. And this was hopefully done within the next few days, and you'll find it within the webinar section. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our speaker for today, Guido Brackelsberg. Guido is founder and managing director for sales and business development at Setlog GmbH in Germany, as well as being video president and chief sales officer at Setlog Corp, which is the 100% subsidiary of Setlog GmbH. Mr. Brackelsberg obtained a Bachelor of Science in Banking and International Finance from the City University Business School in London, and during the 1990s, before his entrance into the global SCM market, he worked for Lehman Brothers in London. During the last 15 years, he's gained extensive experience in the management of global supply chains. So he's highly qualified to talk to you today, so I'll pass you over to Guido now for today's presentation. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you very much, Heather. Hi, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. This is Guido Brackelsberg, and thank you for the very nice introduction. And I really appreciate that you give us, let's say, 35 minutes of your time. We shouldn't take longer. Well, to share with you our thoughts, what a roadmap to a sustainable supply chain could look like. So I'll always try to speak slowly, which is not really a talent of mine, but I'll give my very best, and I promise. And my assistant is going to put up something like a note saying like slow down. So let us get into the presentation. And as Heather said, if there are any questions, please put them in the here in this field, and she'll put it forward to me after the session. So let's get started here. Roadmap to a sustainable supply chain. So just quickly, I need to get this out of the way. They told me, so we're a German company here based in Bochum, Germany, and with an office in New York, founded in 2001. Our main focus is, for those of you that haven't heard of Setlog before, there might be some few out there, is like, we've been focused on supply chain management in the apparel and shoe and basically fast moving consumer goods industries and so forth. So just quickly, Heather was so nice to say that, so I skipped that, but at least you have a picture so you know what I look like. So I hope I'm not too scary. So let's get into this. Before we go into talking about the roadmap or what we feel it could look like, let's get some more educational stuff out there, which I'm sure most of you know, but the three pillars of sustainable development, and they're basically, and I probably read this out to you, the sustainable development of a society, and I've added, or an ecosystem or a supply chain in that respect, can only be achieved if economic, social, and environmental goals are met equally at the same time. These three aspects are mutually interdependent, and that's what we firmly believe. And I think this is, a very interesting development that we're seeing. Just very quickly, if we then say, okay, what is economic sustainability? What is it about? And it basically says a society may not live beyond its means, since this leads inevitably to losses of future generations. And I've added to myself other parts of the society, or maybe the supply chain. And the social sustainability as a society should be organized in a way that social tensions are limited and conflicts do not escalate, but can be solved peacefully. And I think quite here, especially in Europe, but and in the Middle East, we see that this is a very major issue. but we also see this in other countries which are, important to us in the textile supply chain in Bangladesh, Pakistan, where situations have become very difficult over the recent years. And then the environmental sustainability is, as you know, do not overexploit nature in order to allow, regeneration of the sources. So I want you to keep this on the back of your mind as we go through the presentation, because we feel that is something that will be more and more considered, and we hope it will. Yeah. So here's the situation. Edges, as you know, that little guy, it ain't easy being green. As I presume most of you in your organizations, are in the let's say sustainability teams of brands or at university and so forth. So it is very difficult if you just look at the green aspect to sometimes fight that through in an organization, because economic sustainability is, as the CEO says, or the head of sourcing says, we need to generate profits, we need to generate revenues, and this is something that then might be contradictory to the other parts of the sustainability discussion. So here's the situation. What do we look at today? If you have a look at that, and value chains, the textile, or if you look at shoes, the value chains are ever more complex, and they're sometimes confusing. There's more and more information out there. Information is there, but where is it? Is it always at hand? And and transparency is on the rise as well. And if I don't want to tell you how how your daily business works. Just to start the discussion or the presentation, the supply chain is very complex, the textile supply chain. If you look at the automotive industry, it's easy. You build a car for 7 years. But here, you shift sourcing markets, you always have new products, you have new challenges, you have sometimes new treatments of materials. So this is something that is extremely challenging, which is many times is really overlooked when looking at the textile supply chain. And the next thing is you not only have one sourcing country, you have various sourcing regions, and that doesn't make life easier with very different cultures that have to be dealt with. Yeah? And of course, if you then have various product groups, life gets complicated. So at the bottom line, and please have the 3 pillars of sustainability in the back of your mind, is what really is at stake is, of course, it is a coordination frenzy, and there are costs involved with this. There's a decrease in profit margin. And of course, in the end, sustainability is about a competitive edge. Don't forget that. And this is something, if you look at, a brand, if you look at a company, or if you look at a supplier, not only look at your shoes, but put yourself, into, the other parts of the supply chain, there needs to be a competitive edge maintained by all partners in the supply chain. So please have a holistic view of that. So if you look at the coordination frenzy, and what we say is, the 80-20 rule, 80% of the orders of everything works smoothly and fine, no issues. But of the 20%, where there is an issue, where there is a problem, where something does go wrong, that then tends to end up being 80% of the workload that you have to do. A lot of nerve cells involved, data silos, and so forth. So that's a lot that we see out there. Yeah, and the risk of decline in sales volume, that is obviously what the C-level, what the CEOs, CFOs care about is we want to have the goods, in the good, proper quality and the right price. We want to have this at a point of sale in order to drive our sales. What we tend to find a lot in the industry is when you look at a typical brand, you will see that when it comes to the outbound processes of the supply chain, so everything about how do I sell the product to the consumer, a lot of IT investment has been made already. If you look at the latest trend, 3D visualization, if you look all kinds of technology at the point of sales, how do I bring across my product? How do I bring across the emotions of my product? How do I emotionalize it? Now, this is something where a lot of investment has been done. And when it then comes to what we call the inbound supply chain, or upstream, as some people say, then, well, we tend to find, or let's put it that way, the last few years it was very much overlooked, the investment that has been done. Basically saying like, well, you've got your email and you've got your Excel spreadsheets, and there are probably a few initiatives out there that you can use, and that must be sufficient in that respect. So this is something interesting to see going forward, whether that will change. And for us, or for our thinking, this will be a key driver in the terms of a sustainable roadmap. So it's maybe me wondering, but I presume it's a lot of people wondering too. How do I know what's happening in my supply chain in time, in budget, and in compliance to be compliant? Keeping the three pillars in the back of your mind is this is something that has been done by we researched on the internet. My assistant did, and I found that very interesting to say, like, if you look in the middle of the screen, in the middle of the picture you have your design practice, you have product sustainability and business innovation. So if you then go to the right hand side to the consumer engagement, there tends to be a loss of control. Yes, you have. But if you then look at the sustainable supply chain, what we find a lot is there is tier 1, there is tier 2, but then we come to tier 3, tier 4. If you compare that to other industries, for example, take automotive, there is a much higher transparency down to the tier 4 level. And that is something we've put into, and that's something we find very interesting, and this is what we'll see. Our firm belief is we will see strong improvements in that part. So that's what we have on the next screen. Yeah, to show to you, to say, okay, if we look at the left-hand side today, it's a lot of trust. It's a lot of trust there, and there's some black boxes out there. And we have defined it that way, the supplier being tier 1, the factory tier 2, but then you can down to the lower level, the dyeing, the washing processes, or the web processes, or down to the mill. And we actually have more parts of the supply chain actually to look at. I mean, how many of the brands, it really depends on your business model, of course. The more premium you are, the more you will know about your tier 3 and tier 4 levels. But in other segments of the markets, it's more like people say, I know my supplier. That's good, because this is my economic partner. That's my financial trade partner who I have a contract with. And the rest of the supply chain, that is something that I leave up to his scope. I know some of the factories, that used to be the attitude that we found a lot out there 5 years ago. And this has increasingly changed. As people now say, well, we really want to go down to lower levels within the supply chain. We need to understand what's happening there, and we want to gain control of the supply chain. And this is something that we see tomorrow, and many companies are already there today, with the vendor and compliance management in what sort to say, like, okay, how is the mill connected? Or the garments, the bulk garments I get, the fabrics I get, how are they being washed? Where are they being washed? How are they being treated? And how does it relate to my factory and my supplier? Now, it really depends. If you have 20 factories you use, that's rather simple to do. If you look at larger brands, they tend to have, 500, 600, 1,000 factories that they use. And maybe only a large fraction, but only a fraction of those companies that they do know. And that's what we'll find is that's, when you look at the roadmap, is you first of all will have our firm belief, and we see companies doing this, really building the cascade of the supply chain, saying like, how is supplier number A related to the factory, and that factory, where does it, what dyeing and washing facilities does it use, and so forth. So in order to get greater transparency. What we'll find is the next step on the roadmap is, and a lot of people know that, but it's like, what actually needs to be done. And we have this little icon, so that little smiley face is the social compliance, and you've got, quality control. But when we look especially at the dyeing and washing processes, the ecological compliance and the toxicological compliance is something, if you just look at, detox campaign of Greenpeace, that is something that, a lot of companies says, we'll have done on our roadmap, and that's going to be very interesting to see how you're gonna comply with these challenges out there, because that is very, very difficult. And that's why we believe a lot of improvements will be done over the next coming months and years. So social challenges, if you just look at a brand, let's say they have 15,000 corrective actions, so many audits, so many factories, different auditing firms. So this is the daily scope that you have out there. And a comprehensive system, well, probably several. If you look at environmental challenges, ecological challenges, then you can say, well, gallons of water, chemicals used, dyeing houses, audits, comprehensive systems. It gets quite blurry, in terms of what's being done in the supply chain. And then, of course, the economic challenges that we have as well. When you look at the economic sustainability, so many SKUs, purchase orders, suppliers, freight forwarders, comprehensive systems, and this is really the daily challenges that are out there. So this is my favorite screen, and from our experience as a software provider, when we talk to larger brands and larger companies, whether it's here in Europe or the US, there's a huge reluctance to do anything because people are afraid of doing the wrong thing, because where do I engage? There's so many initiatives out there. There's so many auditing outfits. They all have their reason for existence. If you just look at the social piece, what you have out there, you have the Accord, you have the Alliance in the US, but you have the BSCI, you've got Fair, where we got Setlog. You got so many different initiatives, which all doing a very good purpose, which all have which all have the reasons of being there, and it's very good that we have all these initiatives because they help. But they're some of them only solve half of the problem, and maybe, let me allow that to say, maybe they create some of the problems. You probably all have heard this story of this Bengali factory owner that has 3 hooks in his walls, 60 centimeters, 90, and 1 meter 20. And the auditor going like, well, why do you have that? It says, well, just depending, that's my fire extinguisher, and depending who's coming and auditing me, this is the the height where the fire extinguisher has to be. If we flip that around and look at it, and we have a lot of discussions with suppliers, it's really frustrating for them. The audit fatigue is definitely something that we hear from a lot of people. And this is something, but this is, on the other hand, it is the industry trying to scope to improve things, trying, to establish social sustainability, but it's a really, really big challenge getting really the results out there and get the compliance in there. This is really what we find, and this is why there are so many initiatives. Some people rather say, before I do an investment into one direction, if I go one way, I maybe step back and wait for another year. But this is something that we all think is wrong, and you really shouldn't do that. Yeah, but on the other end, I do understand that, because how it's going to pan out, we don't know that. But I'll come to that, what we see evolving on the next slide. But before I go there, the same is with toxicology that you have out there. And there's so many great Ökotechs, Blue Sign, there's so many nice, detox. Or for example, just look at, the DHC, what they're trying to achieve, and they're really achieving a lot. That is super interesting. So the initiatives are out there. Then you look at the environmental side, CPI2 of sustain, so many things, and also then on the quality side. So we always say there's a lot of data out there, but is the data being properly used? Are we making the most out of the data? Or haven't we come to a stage where we say, well, there's actually too much data out of there, and we come to a point of, well, how should I say that? It actually becomes unclearer. Yeah, it becomes messy because there's too much information, too many audits out there. How are audits being comparable? That's, for example, just very interesting. My business partner Nicholas was at the AAFA conference last week in New York, and a lot of people says, how can we actually streamline? How can we harmonize? How can we harmonize all the different initiatives? How do we make it comparable? For one reason, to make it usable at a larger stage for others. Yeah, and that is something. If we come to the next slide, if you see that little chap here with with a question mark, what we firmly believe is what you will see is you will see the evolution. It's not there yet, but you'll see the evolution of unified data clusters, and they're really clustered around the social compliance. So this will be databases and that are not, well, some of them you could say, for example, BSCI, for example, would be a data cluster. But what do you do if you're not in a high-risk country? Then, your supplier will not be covered by the BSCI database. So there is a requirement for something else, to complement that. The same is on the toxic. I think in the social compliance piece, we're the closest to achieving that as an industry. But when you look at quality management, or the environmental piece, I think this is where we see very, very interesting developments as well. Yeah? But in 3 years' time, we hope to really have this data clusters in the industry, that we see this data clusters, so where you basically collect all the data from the various sources in order for brands or, let's say, supply chain partners to make use of this kind of information. But it's not really there yet. It will be quite complex, but we as software providers, and there are other people out there, I think it will be our to really do that, to get to this stage. And the next step that you will have once you have this data clusters is, how do you get this? How do you make efficient use of it? Because the data is all there. Even today, the data is all there. People tell us we have it, but how do I make use of it? I have it in data silos. I have it in Excel. I might have it in this system. I might have it in a BSCI database. It's all there, but it's not in one place. And that's what we believe the next thing is. And this is something that is very interesting, that other industries, are common to use, is that you have corporate portals, cloud-based portals out there that make use, that actually tap this data clusters in order to integrate that into the internal system. So if you look at this, if you look at integration gateways, this is something where they're the extended arm of the in-house systems. And there's one reason. So basically, it will be a subsystem to ERP, to a PLM, to a CID, whatever. And these being the functions within an organization. Why should there only be one portal? Because there are a lot of portals out there. But for example, if I have a PLM portal that suppliers work with, then the logistics team will have their logistics portal that the supplier needs to work with. And when you have quality assurance, then you have that. So how many portals do you want one factory to work with? And this is something that you will see if you look at the sustainable, and when you look at a roadmap for a sustainable supply chain, you really will see this corporate portals, whatever they will look like, is to say, to integrate versions of these. It will not complement or will not make redundant a PLM system or the basic readiness or cloud readiness of the portal, but it will basically concentrate all this information in order to tap and integrate all the various external partners of the supply chain, in order to synchronize the supply chain, in order to tap data clusters and make information available in the portal, and then to put it back into the internal systems. So what you will see is an elimination of emails, or these kinds of emails that you do not need, for gathering information, and also to get rid of all the Excel, the Excel spreadsheets that are really floating around there in the supply chain. This is where we see a huge demand, as a lot of people ask us, how can we do that? How should it be done? What are the requirements? And it's rather this holistic view, we believe, that will be very, very strong in that respect. That is what we say, that needs to be smart connective. That is the idea. The data is there. How do I suck it into a portal, make it available for the internal systems? But also, how do I suck information from the internal system and then distribute it to my supply chain partners? So, and this is, think of the 3 pillars of sustainability. And as I said, as a society, or as I said, as a supply chain, we'll definitely see more value sharing. That's my personal firm belief. You will see over the next, months and years more value sharing business models that are successful already do that. The vertical integration of the supply chain, helping partners, make information available. If you have a cloud-based portal and a factory is connected, well, why not use that portal to educate, to share value to the suppliers, to factories, to dyeing houses, e-learning components and all this. If this is embedded, there's a huge incentive in that case for a factory to get engaged in the portal and actually to use that. And then you are working, or you're sharing your supply chain and you're sharing values along the supply chain. It's a long way, I know that. There are good people out there and there are bad people out there. But I firmly believe is the bunch, the bunch of the good guys is a lot higher than, the bad guys. And we find from our experience, vendors, factories, suppliers, they appreciate the support if it is being given. If a brand says, this is what I want, and that's how you can use a portal to define your workflows. Show your expectations. Don't say, here's my code of conduct, that's 100 pages, read it and then comply, or otherwise, I'll charge you if things go wrong. This is one way of doing it, and that's what most people do because there's none alternative to that. And we say, well, still continue to do that, but maybe, if you have portal technology, cloud-based out there, use that to educate, to share values, to tell them how it's being done, to educate. And this is something that we'll definitely see. That is the only way how you will come, if you say there's a roadmap to a sustainable supply chain. I mean, how will you get to a sustainable supply chain if you don't, share the values, share knowledge along the supply chain? It will not work that way. That's our firm belief. Well, that's something I've just one thing we find important is better process, better margin. And this is how you get then the CFO. Because, yeah, sure, a portal costs money. There is an investment involved, but a better process will result in a better margin. And this is what we see, for example, with the H&Ms that, really have the vertical integration of their supply chain, of large parts of their supply chain. Yeah, there are good reasons for that. They reduce the number of dyeing houses they work with. They reduce the number of factories, but they rather say, okay, they go more into long-term partnerships. And this is something, otherwise, if you do not do that, how will you ever get to a sustainable supply chain? On the other end, there needs to be an economic benefit. Think of the economic sustainability. And this is something we're seeing. If I, as a factory, say, well, if I get a 3-year contract about, and have guaranteed quantities, then I'm in a very different position, to engage with my customers. And this is something that we're seeing. We're not saying we're seeing it in all parts of the textile, let's say, textile spectrum, from premium to to the discount segment, but more and more people realize that cost savings can be achieved, or that let's say not cost saving, but values of that cost savings can be achieved and shared along the supply chain if I really go into long-term relationships. And that is something which always has staggered me in other industries. Automotive, I mean, do you think a BMW or let's say a Land Rover would buy their nuts and bolts every week at a different place? No, they don't do that. Why? I mean, the nut and bolt on a tire is such a, it doesn't even matter. So that does matter because for quality reasons. And this is, why other industry have the vertical integration, and this is something that we firmly believe, is up on the agenda. And this is a lot what CEOs have understood is better process, better margin. Higher vertical integration, a much higher chance of coming to a sustainable supply chain. Yeah, and then of course the other bits and pieces of one platform, one truth. I think you've all seen that. And what we feel, what a corporate portal needs to be, your requirement is it needs to be universally smart connective. Tap as much data as is out there, put it in the portal and make it available to the parts of the supply chain. Yeah, that's what we feel at Setlog is, get the inbound supply chain to a same level of digitalization that you have it on the outbound side. And it doesn't really cost that much money. There is an investment, but we feel it's worth it. It is really worthwhile. It's worthwhile in terms of economic terms. It's worthwhile in terms of social sustainability and also the environmental sustainability. It does make sense to get involved and to invest. And let me finish off with a very nice statement. What does sustainability mean? A very nice statement by Rick Horwich, of Bureau Veritas in the US. He's a wonderful guy. And, he says, what does sustainability mean? Well, maybe just doing the right things. And yeah, this is where I would like to finish my little presentation and say, time to get smart connective. And I'm looking forward to your questions and hope there are many. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Guido. That was great listening. That was. We've had a couple of questions come in, but if anybody else wants to ask Guido any questions via myself, then please do so through the questions and answers box. But I've got a couple that I can already put to you, so if you're ready, Guido, I can start it off. We have a gentleman that's asked a question here. He's very much enjoyed your presentation, but he said, would you be able or willing to share the financial impact of the system in reduced SCM logistics costs using Setlog for medium-sized brands?
For medium-sized brands?
He said plus 500 suppliers, as well as how do you charge for the system and data extraction? I don't know whether this is a conversation that you may want to have with him offline, maybe, but...
Sure, but now I step away from the educational part of this presentation, so if that is allowed, then of course,
yeah.
I'm not shy to talk about that. Now, if you look, now, what we see is, if you vertically integrate your supply chain, if you get more transparency in your supply chain, what happens is, what we see with all of our customers, I'm sure other service providers as well, but we see with our customers is, you will see if you basically put the critical path out there, and if you say, these are my expectations of what I want to have achieved by when, and if you then flip around and the supplier can say, well, okay, let's say I confirm something or I change something, a deadline, for example. If you look at the logistic, the supply chain management part, the order management part, then of course it's for me as a customer. I use the portal, everybody's connected, you work on the same databases. When you can say, well, we have a problem, how do we solve it? You can do it via email or you can do it via a portal. It's much more efficient. So the exception by management that is done in portals, that really helps to reduce logistics costs in terms of, for example, you get a much better, utilization of transportation units. So we have many customers say we had 20-foot containers before, and now we have a lot more 40-foot containers. Or then, of course, avoiding air freight. If I have a transparency over the process from the very first, from the sampling part down to the shipment part. If I have the milestones and I see there's a deviation, then I can intervene at a very early stage and find a solution with my partner at a very early on stage. It also then, if you say savings on the logistics side, it's just how do you optimize the inter-DC process. That can be super exciting. Sometimes, especially large DCs, people say, we got so many shipments coming, we didn't actually know. We knew some of them, but not all of them. I'm not saying that's happening on a daily basis, but it's all about planning, organizing your supply chain. Get a better grip on what is the inflow of the goods. And we have an ROI model, which I'm more than happy to share, with the gentleman who asked the question. It works bigger for others, there's not one rule say like it is, factor X, but we have customers that say within the the first 12 months, we have a very, very positive ROI on the investment that was made.
Fantastic, thanks for that, Guido. Okay, let's have a look at some other questions here. We've got, what are the challenges about internet connectivity and language barriers regarding e-learning, especially in China and Vietnam?
Excellent question. Excellent. I love it. I really appreciate that. As I said, the e-learning part, this is really something that is just about to start to be incorporated, in portals. We see a huge future in there because that really helps. So far, when we look at portals, what our customers do is it is a lot. It is in English mainly. But now, as we're starting to see, is we get now e-learning components in the local languages, and quite frankly, it will have to be seen how good that is being used, or how good that is being, how big the benefit is. What we believe in, though, is especially if you go to tier 3 and tier 4, it needs to be in local language, and there needs to be a benefit to the supplier, and that is a discussion. How do you do that? If you do e-learning, it's nice. I had a few discussions with people that offer this, and this is, Guido, we don't believe in that. You put it in YouTube, and the only ones that's really looking at it is my competitor. I don't want that. However, if you embed it into a portal, your own corporate portal, and say like, here, this is for my suppliers. This is, this is value I want to share. If you then, in my eyes, combine that with an incentive scheme, if you do, but this is something, again, that needs to be embedded in the entire organization. Sourcing needs to accept, per the sourcing departments, that if a supplier is very good at doing these trainings and e-learnings and wants to improve, that must be worth something within, the sourcing paradigm. And that's, of course, in a company, but we see the first companies having these discussions. And I think this is the key. This is the key. If you just put, content out there, which is out there already, I don't think, the benefit will be very high. But if you say we really vertically integrate, we share e-learnings, we share some of our knowledge, I think it really works if it's part of an incentive scheme. And of course, if there's no internet connectivity, there is no e-learning, there is no email, there is then little you can do. But we're working on this e-learning components in local languages. And it's super interesting to see. It's super interesting.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Guido. Okay. Another question that's come in: how do we determine which websites are reliable in presenting correct data which we can use?
What kind of website do you have in mind? So many websites. Well, you have Alibaba, starting with Alibaba, that tells you what, or you have. It's not clear, the question to me. What do you mean by websites? Okay. By website, if you maybe could ask the person.
Okay, all right. I mean, as I say, I'll pass all these on to you anyway afterwards. Here's another one for you. How can technology and supply chain make it more ethical? I think that's kind of what you said today, isn't it?
I think it really is. If you, it makes it more ethical in a way. If you get transparency, if you, for me, integration is, or the brands we speak that want to do that is say, okay, we're going in, we're investing in a system, but the system is just, just shows our investment in our supply chain partners that we want to work with, that we want to integrate with. And integration means like sharing transparencies, being at hand, and as I said, I firmly believe in those business models will be successful where a CEO says, it's okay if we have suppliers and we offer them, let's say, if compliance, social compliance, environmental compliance is part of our evaluation, how much we're paying for a good, for a garment, the CEO says, yes, I'll have that, and a portal can help them. Today it's very difficult. How do you measure that? But if you use a portal and then say it's becoming measurable, dear, head of sourcing, you have two suppliers, but supplier A might be 10 cents cheaper per garment, but supplier B is 10 times better in terms of social compliance. He's really doing a lot. He's just invested in, in some water treatment facilities, so forth. Then it must be worth something. And I firmly believe it is worth something. It is, because that kind of supplier that you integrate with, you will have a much better quality in the product. You should have. if you implement that. That's what we mean by integration. So you save, you really have to look at, where do I save money? If I invest, where do I save? And then I firmly believe it becomes a lot more ethical. Then you really come to a sustainable supply chain if you do that. But that needs to be decided by the CEO. He needs to say, like, I want to go that way. What we want to put out there is now the methodology, the system, the portals are out there in order to measure that, to make that available. What's the financial impact of this integration?
Brilliant. I hope that answers the question there. Okay.
I hope too.
Let me see. What do you mean by smart connective?
By smart connective, it means like there's so much data out there. And that was maybe, the question that the other person put out to me, saying, like, what about website? How can you trust the data? I think the availability of data is not really the problem, because there's a lot of data out there. There's a lot of tests, audits. Otherwise, we wouldn't talk about an audit fatigue. Is for a portal, it needs to be smart connective. We mean, like, how do I tap the right data? What is available? What is the source? And of course, smart connective, that means like there is a BSCI interface. So automatically, from a BSCI, a portal is linked to the BSCI database, for example. That is smart connective. Having the data that is out there in databases, somewhere in data silos, or with testing institutes, and how do you get this information? Or logistics providers, in their portals. Yeah, how do you get this information then into your portal to make it into your own corporate portal? And that's what we mean by smart connective. Tapping the right data from, the right sources.
Fantastic. Okay. So if you were to hold this presentation again in 3 years' time from now, what would you say?
I hope supply chains have become much more ethical. And I firmly believe it will happen because many more, especially, CEOs and, CFOs, I know that my audience believes, there is a financial benefit, or many of them see, if you just have to measure it, how do you measure it? And I think this is, that's in 3 years' time, you will have a different measurement. That is something that I firmly believe is in 3 years' time we will have a lot better places. We still will have problems. I think I am not a social romanticist, but there will be issues out there. But I think there will. I hope there will be less, and people will have more vertical integration of their supply chains, longer-term partnerships, and better processes, more sustainability.
Fantastic. Thanks, Guido. We've had lots of questions come in, so we're not obviously going to be able to get through all of them today live. So I'll be passing them through to Setlog and to Guido to hopefully get back to you all directly if you've got any questions. But shall we wrap it up with one final question? So here we go. Do you see converging trends and developments in the field of sustainability in Europe and US?
That's a good one. That is a good one. Let me think about that. Do I see a difference? That's a very good one. I think both going the same way. Let's put it that way. In the US, you tend to have more publicly listed companies. So they are much stronger. They're much stronger on really implementing, getting grip on their supply chains, getting greater visibility. So that's one thing, maybe in that respect is where the US is a little bit leading. On the other end, you can say Europeans, especially Germans, as we tend to be, as I'm myself, we tend to love detail and are very good at processes and workflows. So I think we're all going into the same directions. And if I put this to the other side, if I look then to the supplier side, he doesn't care whether we're German, German, American, British, French, or whatever. For them, they're all customers, and it would be great, if we would do the same stuff, and also, maybe, this is, companies like us can help, not to have it two different ways, because this is, if you look at data clusters, you rather want to make life easier and harmonize things instead of having everyone doing their own stuff.
Great. Well, I hope everybody's enjoyed today's presentation. I've certainly seen a good few comments come through, Guido, so I'll pass those on to you.
Thank you.
So if there are any other questions following today's event, you can email through to me if you so desire, heather@aroq.com, or obviously you can get in touch with Setlog directly at info@setlog.com. We are making this presentation available to the readers of Just Style, or anybody who wishes to go and find it again. It'll be hopefully on the site within the next few days. And if you really want to listen to it again, we'll be doing it all over again a little later today, won't we, Guido? So
yes.
For those who are in a different area of the world, hopefully. So thank you again for everybody who joined today, and Guido for a brilliant presentation. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for your time. I appreciate it. And please let us know any comments, good or bad. They're all welcome.
Now you've said it.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Take care, everyone. Thanks again. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.